Good day everyone, my name is Darshan Jiva and my matrix number is 299166. In this video presentation, I'll be explaining my research titled The Determinants of Adoption of Digital Payment Among University Uttar Malaysia Students. This presentation will cover 5 main sections, which is background of study, literature review, research methodology, data analysis and findings, and finally discussion and conclusions. Here I will begin with the problem statement. Digital payment systems have become increasingly important in modern commerce and Malaysia is actively progressing towards a cashless society. University students are often considered to the ideal adopters due to the familiarity with the digital technology. However, despite a strong campus infrastructure and high awareness, adoption of digital payment among University Uttar Malaysia students remain uneven. Previous studies shows that although students are aware of e-wallets, QR payments, and mobile banking, their actual usage is often inconsistent due to the concern of related to the security, trust, and perceivable reliability. In the University Uttar Malaysia context, the most vendors accept the cashless payment and yet students frequently switch between the cash and digital methods depending on the promotions, peer influence, or perceived risk. This study focuses on the 3 key determinants of influencing adoption, which is consumer preference, income, price-related factors, and understanding the framework is essential to support the University Uttar Malaysia students' goals and becoming a fully digital campus to align with the student behavior and Malaysia's national digital transformations. Next, we will begin with research questions. This study is guided by 3 main research questions focusing on digital payment demand among University Uttar Malaysia students. The first research question examines whether gender influenced the income factor, price factor, and consumer preference in the demand for digital payment. This allowed the study to identify potential behavior differences across gender groups. The second research question investigates the different primary sources of financial support affects the income factor, price factor, and consumer preference towards the digital payment usage among students. The third research question seeks to determine whether the income factor, price factor, and consumer preference have a statistically significant relationship with the demand for the digital payment among University Uttar Malaysia. Next, we will move on with the research objective. The main objective of this study is to analyze the relationship between income factor, price factor related to digital payment usage and consumer preference among University Uttar Malaysia students. In terms of specific objective, the first objective is to investigate whether the gender differences in the income factor, price factor, and consumer preference related to digital payment usage among UUM students. The second objective is to examine how different primary source of financial resources influence the income factor, price factor, and consumer preferences in the use of digital payment system. The third objective is to analyze the relationship between the income factor, price factor, and the consumer preference in the determining of digital payment adoption among UUM students. This study is grounded in the theory of consumer demand, a core concept in microeconomics that explains how individuals choose goods and services based on price, income, and preferences. In the context of UUM student, this theory helps to explain the choice of digital payment methods such as e-wallets, QR payment, and mobile banking. The demand for digital payment can be illustrated using a demand curve which shows the relationship between the transaction cost and the number of students using the digital payment. The demand curve is downward sloping, meaning the higher transaction cost leads to a lower usage while the lower cost encouragement of higher adoption. This curve can also shift due to the change in the income, reward, and incentive. For example, zero transaction fees and reward programs such as Skipple Pay increase the digital payment among the UUM students. The second theory applied in this study of theory of consumer preference, which explain how students choose between digital payment and cash based on satisfaction and personal preferences. This theory builds on 3 key assumptions. First, more is better, meaning students prefer options that provide greater benefits. Second, the diminishing marginal rate of substitution, where students are willing to substitute cash with digital payment to maintain satisfaction. Third, rational choice where decisions are made consistently based on preferences. Consumer preference are illustrated using indifferent curve, which shows combination of digital and cash transaction that provides the same level of satisfaction. Students with a stronger preference for digital payment will have indifferent curve further from the origin, indicating higher utility. At UUM, improve digital infrastructure and incentive increase the utility of digital payment, encouraging the students to substitute cash with digital methods. Empirical study identifies several key determinants of digital payment adoption among UUM students. First, income affects students' ability to adopt digital payments. Those with higher allowances or scholarship tends to use digital payment methods more frequently, while limited financial resources reduce the usage. Second, price sensitivity plays an important role. Transaction fees, minimum balances, and the availability of discounts or rewards influence the adoption. Students are more likely to adopt digital payment when perceived benefits outweigh the cost. Third, consumer preference and behavioral factors significantly shape adoption. Convenience, ease of use, security, trust and social influence, and the lifestyle consideration determine whether students choose digital payment over the cash. Finally, demand for digital payment reflects the combined effect of these factors. Higher perceived value, service quality, and reward increase adoption, while higher cost or risk reduce it. Together, income, price sensitivity, and consumer preference provide a comprehensive understanding of what drives the digital payment usage among the UUM students. This study formulated several hypotheses to examine the determinants of digital payment adoption among UUM students. First, t-tests are used to test whether gender differences influence the income, price, and consumer preferences in shaping the demand for digital payment. For each factor, the null hypothesis assumes no differences between male and female students, while the alternative hypothesis predicts a significant differences. Second, one-way ANOVA test assess whether students' primary source of financial support affects their demand for digital payment based on income, price, and preferences. The null hypothesis assumed no differences across the financial sources, and the alternative hypothesis suggests that significant differences exist. The regression analysis in these studies examines whether income, price, and consumer preferences have significant effects on the demand for digital payment among UUM students. In the context of null hypothesis, assumes that there is no relationship between these factors and digital payment demand. In contrast, the alternative hypothesis predicts that income, price, and consumer preferences are positively related to adoption. By testing the hypothesis, the study can identify which determinants actually influence the students' choices in adopting the digital payments. The insight is crucial for designing the strategies that encourage consistency, usage, and supports the campus-wide transactions to a fully digital payment system. For conceptual framework, we have dependent variable, which is demand for digital payment, and independent variable, which is three, income factor, price factor, and preference factor. Let's move on to the research design, which is study focuses on identifying the factors that influence the digital payment adoption among UUM students. A quantitative research design is employed using hypothesis testing to examine the relationship between independent variables such as income, price, and consumer preferences, and the dependable variable, which is demand for digital payment. Primary data is collected through an online questionnaire distributed to undergraduate students across the College of Business, College of Arts and Sciences, and College of Law, Government and International Studies. These questionnaires was shared via social platforms including WhatsApp, Telegrams, and Instagram to ensure broad research and efficient data collection. The study population consists of 19,685 undergraduate students at UUM. Using convenience samplings, a total of 377 students were selected to represent this population. These sampling methods allow easy and practical access to respondents while providing a reliable data for the study. The t-test analysis was conducted to examine whether gender differences influence the income factor in the adoption of digital payment among UUM students. The result indicates that the mean income factor scores for male and female students are very similar. Leavian tests confirm that the assumption of equal variances is met. Most importantly, the p-value is for the differences between gender is greater than 0.05, indicating that there is no statistical significance differences. In other words, male and female students perceive the income factor as equal important when deciding to adopt a digital payment. Therefore, a null hypothesis for this test is not rejected. A t-test was conducted to examine whether gender influences the price factor in the adoption of digital payment among UUM students. The result shows that the mean scores for male and female students are very close, with females slightly higher than males. Leavian tests confirm equal variances and the p-value for the gender differences is greater than 0.05. This indicates that there is no statistical significance differences between male and female students regarding the importance of the price factor. In the practical terms, both male and female students considered the price factor equally when deciding to adopt the digital payment. Consequently, the null hypothesis for this test is not rejected, suggesting that gender does not affect the price sensitivity in this context. The t-test was conducted to examine whether the gender influenced the consumer preference factor in the adoption of digital payment among UUM students. The result shows that female students' mean scores is slightly higher than the male students. Levian tests confirm equal variances and the p-value is greater than 0.05, indicating that differences between gender is not statistically significant. In the practical terms, but both male and female students perceive consumer preferences factors such as convenience, usefulness, and security. Similarly, when deciding to adopt digital payment, this finding aligns with previous studies suggesting that both genders respond in comparable ways to digital payment features. A one-way ANOVA was conducted to examine whether the student's primary source of financial support influenced the income, price, and consumer preference factors in adopting the digital payment. The result shows that in all three cases, the p-value is greater than 0.05, indicating no statistical significance differences across the groups. In practical terms, this means the student perceived the importance of income, sensitivity to price, and preferences, such as convenience, trust, and ease of use. Similarly, regardless to whether their support comes from parents, scholarships, or other sources. Therefore, the null hypotheses are not rejected and suggesting that economic background has a little impact on adoption and that attitudinal and technological factors as well as incentive or reward are more influential in shaping the students' digital payment behaviors. A multiple regression analysis was conducted to examine the relationship between consumer preferences, income, and price factor on the demand for adopting digital payment among UUM students. The model explains 63.4% of the variation in the demand, indicating strong explanatory power, and the overall model is statistically significant. Looking at the individual factors, consumer preference has a positive but insignificant effect on the adoption, suggesting that preference alone may not drive a usage without economic incentive. In contrast, the income factor has a significant positive effect, meaning the students with the higher allowances, financial resources, are more likely to adopt digital payment. The price factor is the strongest predictor with the lower transaction cost, discount, or rewards significantly increasing the adoption. This result highlights that while attitudes and preference matters, economic consideration, especially the price and income, play a dominant role in shaping the digital payment demand among the UUM students. In conclusion, the finding of this study shows that the adoption of digital payment among UUM students is driven primarily by economic factors. Both income and financial incentive strongly influence the usage, while convenience alone is sufficient to sustain consistent adoption. This suggests that perceived value, such as lower transaction fees and reward, is the key long-term in the digital payment. However, this study has some limitation. It was conducted only at one university, so the result may be generalizable to other institutions. Data collection was conducted via online surveys, which may introduce response bias. Additionally, the cross-sectional design limits the ability to capture the changes in the behavior over the time. Finally, the study focuses only on income, price, consumer preferences factors, where it did not examine other potential influences. Based on this finding, several policy implications can be considerable. Universities should provide financial support and incentive for low-income students, standardize the cashless payment acceptance across all campus services, and minimize the transaction fees for essential payments, and furthermore, strengthening the trust, improving the security, communication, and enhancing the students' digital literacy will help promote adoption. For future research, it is recommended to expand the sample to multiple universities for better generalizable and comparative analysis. The additional variables such as perceivable risk, trust, and social influence should be included in the improved explanatory power. Longitudinal and qualitative methods can be used to examine behavioral changes over the time and platform-specific adoption and its relationship to students, and financial management could also be explored. Overall, the insight provide a strong foundation for understanding the digital payment adoption among university students and guiding the strategies to increase the cashless payment in the campus.